Hello. Today we are here to do my biannual haul, and for those of you who have been around for a while, you know that I have been using my TBR read down as my main impetus for general reading on the channel in the last couple of years. But does that stop me from acquiring new books? It does not. So I must have a biannual reckoning with the fact that I am still bringing in books that I have not yet read. So you will be seeing every book that I have acquired between January 2026 and June 2026 that as of this filming, I have not yet read. So I have some stats that I'll share with you, and then we'll go through all the books and we'll talk about why I got them. And, you know, we'll have a general moment of public shaming for the fact that I got them and have not yet read them. So, yeah, I haven't finished compiling, like rounding up all the books yet. So I'm gonna throw you to future me to show you the books and to talk about the stats. Okay, let's start by talking about how I'm doing on my stats. So my overall goal is that I am trying to acquire fewer books onto my actual TBR, and I'm defining TBR as books that I want to read and that could, in theory, at some point exit my collection. Now, I mean, obviously all books that could be the case, but for instance, if I acquire a new collection, a book in a collection that I have, like the Penguin Clothbound Classics, I'm not gonna count them in here because I am planning on reading the ones that I haven't yet read, but I can do that at any time, basically, like from now until my theoretical demise in 40 years. So they're like less time sensitive and they're not on my active TBR. The other thing is, if I read a book after I acquire it in between these hauls, they also do not show up here. So I have acquired more books than what you're going to see here, but these are the ones that by the time I'm posting this, I had not yet read. So yeah, just a caveat on the stats here. So first of all, in terms of the number of books that I added onto my TBR, I added 28, which is the same number that I added last time. So you can see, since I started tracking this about 2 years ago, I have been trending downwards. Not always, but in general, trending downwards. And my goal is that I stay at 100% or less of what I hauled the last time to this time. So for instance, since I hauled 28 books in the last one of these videos I did, I met my goal by not hauling more than that. So I also hauled 28 books in this one. So that would be a win. Yeah, anything that's, like I said, anything that's 100% or less, I would consider to be meeting my goal. Because that means that over time, I'm adding fewer and fewer books to my TBR that I need to read. That seems like that doesn't make sense. That are imminent, how to say. Basically, it just means that over time, I'm acquiring and reading books within a 6-month window, which is ultimately kind of where I'd like to get to. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, and then the next one I'm showing is the books read from my last haul by the next haul. So what that means is of the 28 books that I hauled in the previous video, how many of those books did I read to now? And in this case, I read 13 of the 28 books that I showed you in the last video. And even though, so the number of the books that I read went down, if you look at it in this view in absolute terms, like the absolute number, it went down. But as a percentage of the overall haul, I am trending upwards. And that's really exciting. Like I said, my goal is that I start being able to read my TBR books within a 6-month window. So ultimately, I would like for this to get to 100%, but we are trending in the right direction. Hopefully this will continue to go up. Okay, now let's talk about the actual books that I hauled. So first up, we have a couple of books from authors that I know and love. So this first one is Beast Business by Alona Andrews. This is another entry in their Hidden Legacy series, which I love and I would say is probably their best quality series they've done so far. I'm holding this as a break in case of emergency book for now, which is, I kind of am loath to fully catch up with Alona Andrews. I still have a couple of those books out there that I'm kind of just putting off reading because I don't want to be fully caught up. So I have this, I got it as a pre-order, but I don't have a definitive plan to read this one yet. So I guess this is immediately we have an example of where I will probably never get to 100% of books that I read in a 6-month window, but we can still have goals. Okay, then I have, I think, 2 books in this. Yeah, I think I have 2 books in this from Howard Zinn. So the first one is The Failure to Quit, Reflections of an Optimistic Historian. I read and absolutely loved a book from Howard Zimmerman earlier this year. You probably best know him from The People's History of the United States, but the book that I read that back in the day, and I'm going to reread it because it has been a long time, but the book that I read and loved from him earlier this year is Disobedience and Democracy. Fantastic. So I would like to read more from him. And yeah, this is the first one I picked up from him. And then the second one was a collection of speeches of his called Howard Zinn Speaks. So yeah, I'm excited to get to both of those sooner rather than later. Then I picked up a few Louise Erdrichs. These are some of my go-to ones when I'm in an independent bookstore and I want to buy something. This will be a broken record on my channel if you are a regular watcher, but I always buy something if I go into an independent bookstore. And yeah, so I picked up The Painted Drum and then also The Beat Queen. And I love Louise Erdrich, and I'm sure these will be great when I get to them. Okay, then transitioning into books I picked up for different research projects that I'm working on for different writing things. So first, I picked up The Anglo-Saxons, A History of the Beginnings of England by Mark Morris. This is pretty much what it says on the tin. I also picked up King Arthur, Myth-Making and History by N.J. Hyam. This is talking about like the historicity of King Arthur and what we know about that. Next, this is a pretty recent release, I believe, is The Gales of November, The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald by John U. Bacon. Definitely know the contours of this story, and I also obviously know the song. The Edmund Fitzgerald definitely is something I sing to myself every time the name Fitzgerald comes up. So yeah, I'm excited to learn more. I am an official boat guy. I'm in my middle-aged dad era when it comes to that stuff. Then we've got False Summit, Gender in Mountaineering Nonfiction by Julie Rack. Again, what it says on the tin here, this is an area of special interest to me, and I'm trying to finish writing my take on this before I read the book, so that I'm not overly influenced by her arguments, but I definitely want to hear what she has to say because it's very relevant to what I'm doing. And then I have 2 classics of mountaineering memoir expedition type stories. The first is Annapurna, The First Conquest of an 8,000 meter Peak by Maurice Herzog. This is an oldie but a goodie from what I've heard. And then The White Spider, the classic account of the ascent of the Eiger. This is by the same guy, I believe, who wrote 7 Years in Tibet. So I'm guessing this is going to be beautifully written. Then we have a book about media, which is How to Sell a Genocide, The Media's Complicity in the Destruction of Gaza. Yeah, this is going to be a hard read, but an important one. So strapping in for that. And then last in this section, but not least, is another classic nonfiction work, which is Orientalism by Edward W. Said. I started reading a different one from him, and in his preface to that, he mentions specifically that he considered that book to be a sequel to Orientalism. So I made the decision that I should come back and read that first before reading the other one. Okay, and then random nonfiction section that I was influenced by. First is on civil disobedience. I'm specifically wanting to read the Henry David Thoreau essay, but there's also an essay in this from Hannah Arendt. I already have her essay in a different collection, but I did not have his, and it has been getting referenced a lot recently for reasons that I think are obvious. Then I've got a couple ones about the Holocaust. So one is The Language of the Third Reich by Victor Klemperer. I picked this one up because On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder, he mentioned this several times about this book in particular several times when he was referring to different ways language gets used in propaganda, and it piqued my interest and I would like to read more. And then Hitler's Willing Executioners, Ordinary Germans and the Holocaust. This one, again, I've just seen referenced a lot for reasons that are probably surmisable. And I think this will be a sobering but important historical nonfiction read. Then I've seen a few people referencing Blood and Money, War, Slavery, Finance, and Empire, essentially talking about the relationship of the monetary system and slavery, which I don't know anything about, but I think will be an interesting read, especially in light of some of the modern forms of slavery that we're seeing around the world. So that'll be intriguing. Then another nonfiction classic. I believe this is a nonfiction classic. I think this came out in the 60s. The Black Jacobeans, Toussaint Louverture, and the Saint Domingo Revolution. This, I believe, is about the Haitian Revolution, and I've just seen it popping up on a lot of lists of people talking about nonfiction that they love. So I think this was another, I was in a bookstore and wanted to buy something and thought, ooh, I've seen people talking about that. Okay, and then I've got 3 books from people who I've enjoyed seeing on podcasts. So one is Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. I was intrigued by this when it came out, but since then, it just gets referenced constantly as about how great it is. So I'm really excited to get to this one. It's a memoir, but specifically her reflecting on parallels between her and Naomi Wolf and what that says about our current culture and landscape. So yeah, I think that's going to be a really intriguing memoir. Then Crack Up Capitalism, Market Radicals and the Dream of a World Without Democracy by Quinn Slobodian. I have seen him on several podcasts talking about sort of the 20th century history of neoliberalism in a way that was really clarifying and also terrifying. So I'm only gonna read this one when I'm in a good mental headspace, because yeah, I think that this could be like a black pill material for me potentially. So I will treat this one with caution. And then the last of my nonfiction picks here. Oh no, that's not true. I have a couple more, sorry. Another nonfiction pick, I guess I should say. I pre-ordered this one, is Here Where We Live Is Our Country by Molly Crabapple. I saw her on a podcast talking about this book and I was like, oh, this sounds so interesting. This is the history of the Jewish Bund movement in the 20th century. And specifically, I think her intent, so her family were a part of this movement. And I think part of her intention in writing this is to counter the idea that Zionism has always been the only agreed upon solution of how to combat anti-Semitism, because the Jewish Bund movement specifically was rejecting that and had alternative perspective, a leftist worker first type perspective. And it's called Here Where We Live Is Our Country because there's this concept of like hereism in that tradition where like, you know, I think it's kind of hearkening back to like Jeremiah in the Jewish Bible, where it talks about like, you know, plant vineyards, like prosper in the land where you are. So anyway, I'm excited to read this one when I'm in the mood for a nice chunky, thick history. Then The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. The fact that I have not yet read this is actually extremely shameful because me and Leanna are supposed to be buddy reading this, and I think both of us over the summer have just like fallen off on it. So I need to reach out to her and get this back on our schedule. But yeah, this is a fantasy that she was interested in us trying together, and I think that it includes sort of like a strong mystery plot to it, which is part of why she thought that I would like it. So yeah, I don't really know anything about it other than it was one she recommended. And so I'm intrigued to try it, and also very excited to get back to a nice schedule of reading with her. Okay, then a couple more nonfiction ones. So How to Abolish Prisons and Dismantling Mass Incarceration and A Handbook for Change. Both of these I picked up after that I forget what I called it, like my revolutionary nonfiction vlog. I was talking about how I wanted to read books that were a little bit more like tactically minded about abolition for incarceration, like how that would actually work. Just so that I don't know. I feel like that to me is the biggest question mark. Like I like the idea of abolition, like ideologically it makes sense to me, but I have questions about like, what is the path to get there? And like, practically, what does that look like? So I'm hoping that these two books will help me get my arms around that better. And then Algo Speak, I picked this up when I was trading in books at McKay's at the beginning of the year. So how social media is transforming the language of the future. I've seen this one kicking around, and that just sounds like a very me nonfiction topic. So I figured, I got a lot of credit. I'll just spend it on that. And then last but not least, I have Japanese Tales of Mystery and Imagination, which is a short story collection from the classic Japanese mystery author Edogawa Rampo. This I'm very excited to get to. I was hoping to get to it in my Japanese mystery vlog, but I just kind of ran out of steam. So I will save it for another day, but I'm imagining that this is going to be a delightful melange of fun puzzle mysteries from, you know, kind of the granddaddy of the current Japanese mystery genre. So yeah, those I think are all the books. Okay, that was all the books that I acquired in the first 6 months of 2026. How do you feel about that? Do you have the same level of judgment that I have towards myself? Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I hauled, or if you have strong feelings about any of them. And yeah, I think that will do it for me. I hope you are taking care of yourself and your community, and that you are well. And I will just talk to you soon.